Mr. Vijay Surya, presenting other sections of our educational and research fields. Mr. Kamalagoda, firstly I would like to thank you all for inviting me to be with this seminar on mind mingle attempts across India and Sri Lanka, which is the word itself gives a lot of new areas to explore and progress. So you are welcome to Sri Lanka. You've been here before. Sri Lankans have been with you in the educational sector. Education, of course, covers a tremendous area as the world grows. As the world grows, fields of education develop. We are very much, I would like to say, at the moment interested in concentrating with your support, with your guidance and interaction into the field of preschool education, which our government and village level across Sri Lanka is concentrating at the moment. In that, I think there are many areas where Mr. Kamalagoda also has been having a dialogue with you all. Then we go into the area that was mentioned by the chamber, which is very important. There are programs where schools and chamber post-school education students join in for training and qualify. Those who can't proceed further, was mentioning to Mr. Sharma. We also have a problem in Sri Lanka where about 100,000 of our A-level students who qualify for university do not have the number of seats available. Here the challenge, I think even in India, there is a similar percentage that seeks new areas. IT, technical education, various fields which are open, which should be possibly accessible to students. Now here the problem comes, whether they would be oriented in pursuing those areas. Therefore, what you mentioned, at the beginning in school, they must have a fairly balanced, open mind to proceed up, where they do not stick to their perhaps guided forms of education, where the school system, perhaps the teacher might influence and the class might influence and put them on track into certain areas like science, arts, history or something like that. That's a choice, true. But also the choice should be considered by the students at some stage where he would want to serve society, be a citizen, have a good family in the future and serve the nation. Because this is, I guess, the whole philosophy of learning with the patterns that India has had. I would like to mention Nalanda University. When it was set on fire, there was a Sri Lankan professor at the very last moments of Nalanda. It's recorded. Professor who had traveled from Sri Lanka. Many of our talent educators have been inspired by Shanti Niketan in the last few decades. It was founded by Pandit Rabindranath Tagore. His visits to Sri Lanka a couple of times inspired to have a different form of education. So these how we also have expanded. So we have something in common, or I would say much in common between Sri Lanka and India, which we should pursue. When I visited as foreign minister in January 2020, I was mentioning to Mr. Sharma, there was an appointment and we proposed an agreement with our Minister of Technology. And that agreement subsequently was approved by the Sri Lankan government and it is now in force. There are a lot of new areas that we could explore. There is the university system which we are already linked to. But there are university degree awarding institutions like NITA in our country, which is another approach. So many institutions that are interested in supplementing the students' higher education as well as the relationship to our development. I would just, as the principals are here, I was reading through the list that was attending the seminar, and I was in fact very much happy to read that there was a principal, forget the name, who had come from Annie Besant school in Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh. Now, Annie Besant name has a connection to Sri Lanka. Olcott from the US came to our countries, searching or wanting to assist in education as well as Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy. Annie Besant was party to this. Anagarika Dharmapala, who is one of our national heroes of our country, had a very close relationship with these organizations. You all know, I think you all have read about Anagarika Dharmapala. He started one of the leading schools, not the state school, but the first private school in Sri Lanka, Ananda College, Nalanda College, Dharmapala College, now well over 100 years in Sri Lanka. And the Buddhist Theosophical Society that started schools in our villages. All of them were private schools contributed by the local wealthy as well as the educated in those villages. And that's how our school system evolved until the government took over all the schools in 1962. But prior to that, we had passed the Free Education Act in Sri Lanka, where the right to free education was guaranteed under the law. So every child has the right, has accessible school system to proceed to education and knowledge, which is essential. We, as Ministry of Education, we are dedicated for not allowing anyone to fall by. Everyone who needs to go through education should be supported and guaranteed the forms of education. So our school system perhaps might differ in some areas to the Indian system. So this exchange as well as possibilities of future exchanges is very important and we appreciate. Just running through your program, I saw those magnificent buildings. Now, I think we have to learn something from India, because Sri Lanka also has built a lot of buildings. We preoccupy ourselves by building structures. I, as Minister of Education, have been questioning, why are we building such a amount of structures and allowing it to be vacant for almost 16 hours a day? Where does that investment go? Can't we bring in the private sector short courses, language, IT, the STEM courses which are not available in some of the schools, because most of them are in walking distance or a short bus ride for most of the students, or those even who have left would like to do an extra course. So on this front, I would like invite Mind Mingle and our organizations, the principals to work on. And thank the Sabaragamo province for taking this initiative. They have taken a lot of initiative. Most of the teachers have traveled to India, come back, exchange. We need this. We need system change, because we have the resources in both our countries. System changes are necessary. Otherwise, we follow the same system and come to the bottleneck and argue how we could solve. But we could start solving through the system, school system. School systems have to change, as you have shown. Science learning programs have to start changing. We have just started a similar program with 100 schools in Sri Lanka, where the teachers would not only be teaching to memorize, asking the students to memorize. Of course, that is also necessary sometimes, because Mr. Vijayasuriya will agree with me, and this memory also very important, because most of the time, if you don't memorize, politicians forget. They like to forget. Only the citizen would remember to tell the politician, look, what you told us, he memorized it. So it is very important that we approach the new areas. I do not want to take much time. As Minister, I am very much appreciative of this program, and I hope we have a close relationship as the organizers have been pursuing. Sri Lanka is just 1 hour away by flight to India, and we had, just to interest you all, Sri Lanka and India is at the moment discussing to restore our train service which goes through our Mannar, Talamannar to South India. When that was the train service that lasted for many years, because I was also mentioned, my father was a freedom fighter in India, and he was jailed in India for joining the freedom fight in India. To the ladies, my mother was also jailed, but they crossed when they were being chased by the police in Sri Lanka to India by train. So in Mumbai, that great city, Maharashtra, all of these freedom fighters, supporters from Sri Lanka escaped and lived for a couple of years till we got our independence. I just want to mention that because therefore Sri Lankans and Indians are very much closer, culturally, historically, in our ways of thinking, upbringing, what we appreciate and what we can do. I wish today's seminar all success, and I hope this message will not only go to the schools but also go to people of India who should visit Sri Lanka often and have a better exchange and understanding of Sri Lanka. Mentioning Orissa and Sri Lanka. That's a very historical connection. The tooth relic that is in Kandy Tooth, Temple of the Tooth, worshipped by millions, and the annual parade, the Perahera cultural event, which also draws many tourists from around the world, came from Orissa, down Orissa. And with it came and different folk and music from India, which is even practiced today. So there's a long connection in some parts, other parts of India, from Gujarat. So we have, I mentioned this to promote the school relationship that you all have established, so that we could have exchanges between the schools, because today IT is developed, technology is developed, schools can have the mind mingle programs which could further enhance the interests of our students to find new areas of learning and practicing, and so that our future generation, which is a future of our world, future for our countries, achieve higher standards which we have achieved historically in our civilization. Perhaps this century is for us, it's for Asia. Let us all work towards bringing our children, students, to the new society to face the new challenges. I wish you all success. Thank you.